My name is Jack, and I never thought I would be the guy sharing his personal heartbreak with the world. But after last night, I need to get this off my chest. Maybe it will help someone else see the signs before it is too late. Maybe it will just help me process what happened. Either way, here I am. Megan and I had been married for 9 years. 9 years of what I thought was a solid, unshakable marriage. We had history, traditions, inside jokes that spanned almost a decade. I was never the perfect husband, but I was loyal, dependable, and I loved her more than anything. But love means nothing when it is one-sided. And looking back, I should have seen it coming. The signs were there. It started small, missed calls, ignored texts, the way she started pulling away little by little. Then came the excuses. Work is crazy. Just a girl's night. You are imagining things. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But deep down, I knew. I had known for months. The connection we once had was gone. Replaced by something colder. Something distant. Yesterday was the breaking point. Megan had been off all day. She was more impatient than usual, checking her phone constantly, barely engaging in conversation. At dinner, she barely ate, pushing her food around her plate like a kid forced to sit at the table. Her mind was somewhere else. Someone else. I could feel it. And then, out of nowhere, she said it. I am going out tonight. Not a question. Not an invitation. A statement. I put my fork down, my jaw tightening. Where? She hesitated. Just for a second. Just enough for me to notice. A party. Whose party? She sighed, already annoyed, as if I was exhausting her just by asking. Does it matter? That was all I needed to hear. My chest tightened. My hands curled into fists under the table. But I forced myself to stay calm. No more pretending. No more ignoring the truth staring me in the face. It is Ryan's, isn't it? She froze. A fraction of a second. A moment of hesitation. But it was enough. Ryan. Her ex. The one she swore she had no lingering feelings for. The one she insisted was just a friend. Her silence was louder than any excuse she could have given. I need some space, she muttered, pushing her chair back. I just want to have fun tonight. I should have fought. I should have demanded answers. But something inside me snapped. I was done begging for her love. Done trying to hold together something that was already shattered. Go, I said, my voice flat. She looked at me then, like she was waiting for an argument, waiting for me to fight for her. But when I gave her nothing, she rolled her eyes, grabbed her purse, and walked out without another word. The front door closed behind her. And that was when I made my decision that I was not going to sit here waiting like a fool. No. When Megan walked through that door the next morning, she was going to realize just how badly she had underestimated me. The house felt too quiet after she left. Too still. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair across from me, at her plate of untouched food. She had barely eaten. And yet, when she walked out of here, she had energy. Excitement. She had been waiting for this all day, counting down the hours until she could be anywhere but here, with me. I exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over my face. Should have hurt more. I should have been angry, but all I felt was a strange, hollow acceptance. Maybe I had already been grieving this marriage for months without realizing it. Maybe, deep down, I had known all along that this was coming. The worst part? I was not even surprised. The late-night talks had disappeared. The affection, the laughter, the spontaneous little moments that made us, gone. Replaced with avoidance, silence, and worst of all, indifference. I used to think the worst thing in a marriage was anger. I was wrong. The worst thing is nothing. And that is exactly what I felt now. But that did not mean I was just going to sit here and let her walk all over me. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. If she thought I was going to be the pathetic husband waiting for his cheating wife to come home, she was dead wrong. Walking into the bedroom, I pulled open the closet and stared at her side. Her dresses, her shoes, her carefully arranged jewelry. She had always been so meticulous about her things, so particular about how everything was placed. For a moment I thought about how different we were. I never needed much. I was simple. But Megan? She always needed more. More attention. More excitement. More of whatever it was she had been chasing for the past few months. Well, tonight she was getting exactly what she wanted. And when she came home, she was going to see what that really meant. That I grabbed the first hanger, pulled it down, and tossed the dress onto the bed. Then another. And another. Slowly, methodically, I went through her things. Not in anger. Not in a fit of rage. Just with purpose. She wanted space. She was about to get more than she ever asked for. Moving through the house, I gathered everything that belonged to her. Her makeup brushes on the dresser. Her perfume bottles lined up on the bathroom sink. The stack of magazines she never read but insisted on keeping. And for the first time in a long time, I realized how little of it belonged to us. At some point, our life together had stopped being together at all. It had become separate. Mine and hers. Two different worlds that only occasionally crossed paths. And tonight, that realization did not hurt. I reached for a suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. The same one we had used on our honeymoon. The same one she had packed with excitement in her eyes, talking about all the places we would go together. I wondered if she even remembered that now. Probably not. The irony was not lost on me as I unzipped it and started neatly placing her clothes inside. I was not doing this in anger. No, this was something else. I was giving her what she so clearly wanted: space. Freedom. A fresh start. Away from the husband she had long since stopped loving. I moved through the room with quiet efficiency, making sure everything was ready. I did not know how late she planned to stay at that party, how long she would pretend she was not betraying me. But when she walked through that door, she was going to feel it. She was going to see, know, and understand exactly what she had done. And this time, there would be no coming back from it. By the time I finished packing Megan's things, the bedroom felt different. Lighter. Emptier. Not just in a physical sense, but emotionally, like the air itself had shifted. This room, our room, had been filled with so many memories. Late-night conversations, lazy Sunday mornings, whispered confessions in the dark. Now, all that was left was a neatly packed suitcase sitting by the front door. Waiting for her, I stepped back, surveying my work. Everything of hers was packed with precision. The dresses she always obsessed over, the shoes she swore she could not live without, the perfume she had started wearing more frequently when she went out, the necklace I had given her for our 5th anniversary, the one she once called her lucky charm but had not worn in over a year. I tossed it in, not out of sentiment, but because I did not want it in this house anymore. This house. For so long, it had been ours. But standing here now, I realized it had not been ours for a long time. It had been mine. She had just been passing through. I turned off the bedroom light and walked back into the living room, sinking onto the couch. The silence stretched around me, thick and heavy, pressing down on my chest. I had spent months trying to avoid this moment, pretending that things were not as bad as they clearly were. But now, there was no more denying it. I glanced at the clock. 2:13 a.m. Still no sign of Megan. Not that I expected her to be home any earlier. I told myself I would not check my phone, but my hand betrayed me, reaching for it before I could stop myself. I unlocked the screen, opened our message thread. Nothing. No missed calls. No texts. I had not expected her to reach out. But somehow, seeing the empty notification bar still stung. I scrolled up, reading our last conversation from earlier that evening. Megan, I just need some space. Stop making a big deal out of it. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. That was always the way it went, wasn't it? When she needed space, I was supposed to step aside. But when I needed honesty, reassurance, commitment, I was too sensitive, too controlling, making a big deal out of nothing. It was not just this party. It was 1,000 little betrayals stacked on top of each other, each one cutting deeper than the last. The way she had stopped reaching for my hand in public. The way she had started dressing up more for girls' nights, when she never used to before. The way she had grown more defensive, more distant, more absent. I had spent months making excuses for her. Not anymore did I set my phone down and leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. I told myself I would not wait up for her, that I did not care what time she stumbled through that door. But the truth was, I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized what was waiting for her. I wanted her to feel understand that she had finally pushed too far. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, a reminder that the world outside was still moving forward, even as my own life was unraveling. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, grabbing a glass from the cupboard. It was the same one Megan always teased me about for being too plain, too boring. I smirked to myself as I filled it with water. Funny how the smallest things could feel like a reclaiming of something lost. The clock read 3:07 a.m. Still nothing. For a brief moment, I wondered if she would even come home. If she would stay at Ryan's, wake up in his bed instead of ours. Would she even care that I knew? I shook my head. It did not matter anymore. What mattered was what I did next. Leaning against the counter, I glanced toward the front door where her suitcase sat like a final chapter waiting to be closed, and then I heard it. The sound of a car door slamming outside, sharp, final, cutting through the quiet like a knife. My eyes flicked to the clock. 3:42 a.m. Footsteps on the pavement. Slow, hesitant. She was not stumbling drunk. That would have almost been easier. If she had come home tipsy, careless, laughing about some inside joke only she and Ryan understood, I could have at least written her off completely. But no, this was different. She hesitated before unlocking the door. That told me everything I needed to know. She knew. The door creaked open, and Megan stepped inside. I did not say a word that I just watched. She was still wearing the dress she had left in, but it looked different now. Wrinkled, slightly off-center, like she had been wearing it too long, like she had moved in it too much. Her makeup was smudged, her hair slightly tousled. The confidence she had when she walked out the door hours ago, gone. Her eyes landed on the suitcase instantly. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. "Jack," she said, her voice quieter than usual. Uncertain. I did not respond right away. I wanted her to feel it, the weight of the silence, the tension in the air. I wanted her to realize that something had changed. Finally, I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Did you have a good night?" Her lips parted like she wanted to answer, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way I was looking at her. Maybe it was the way her things were packed, waiting for her. Maybe, for the first time, she realized she had underestimated me. She swallowed hard. "It was just a party." I nodded slowly. "Just a party." A beat of silence passed between us. Then, I gestured toward the suitcase. "That's yours." Her breath hitched. What is this?" I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "It's what you wanted, isn't it? Space." She took a step forward, her expression shifting from shock to something more desperate. "Wait, hold on. You are kicking me out." I let out a small, humorless laugh.
No, Megan.
"You did that when you walked out of here and went back to him." The color drained from her face. I did not. It was not like that." I arched a brow. "Then what was it like?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time, she had nothing to say. I stood up, walking toward her, stopping just a few feet away. "I loved you, Megan. I gave you everything. And you spent the night at your ex's house." My voice remained steady, but I saw the impact of my words in the way she flinched. "So no, I am not kicking you out," I continued. "I am just finally accepting the choice you already made." Her eyes glistened with something that might have been regret, maybe guilt, but it was too late for that now. She looked at the suitcase again, her breath shaky. I do not have anywhere to go." I shrugged. "Not my problem." A silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then finally, she nodded. Not because she agreed, but because she realized I was not going to change my mind. Without another word, she reached for the suitcase. And just like that, the life we had built together was over. Megan's fingers tightened around the suitcase handle, knuckles turning white. She did not move right away. Instead, she just stood there, staring at me like she was expecting something. Maybe she thought I would break, that I would take it back, tell her she could stay, tell her we could talk this through, fix it. But there was nothing left to fix. The moment she walked out of this house to be with him, she had made her choice. And now, she was living with it. She swallowed hard and took a step toward the door. Then another. But before she reached it, she stopped. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed over my chest. "That's not my concern, Megan." Her head snapped toward me, frustration flashing in her eyes. "You can't just throw me out like this." I let out a quiet laugh. "I'm not throwing you out. I'm letting you go. There's a difference." She blinked, like the words took a second to register. Then, for the first time since she walked through that door, I saw it. Panic. "Jack, please." She tried again, voice softer now. I made a mistake." That made me pause. I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "A mistake?" I repeated slowly. "That's what you're calling it?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, I got caught up in the moment. I took a step forward, cutting her off. "You spent the night at your ex's house, Megan. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." She shook her head rapidly, desperation creeping into her voice. "Nothing happened." I almost laughed at the audacity of it. "Nothing happened." I repeated, raising an eyebrow. She hesitated. A tiny, almost imperceptible pause. But it was there. I had spent 9 years with this woman. I knew every little tell, every nervous tick. And in that split second, she told me everything I needed to know. I let the silence stretch between us, watching her squirm. "You expect me to believe that?" I finally said. "I swear," she insisted. "I drank too much. I crashed on the couch. That's it." I sighed, shaking my head. "You know, Megan, if you had come home and admitted the truth, if you had just owned what you did, I might have respected you for it." Her face twisted in frustration. "I am telling you the truth." "Are you?" I asked, staring her down. She opened her mouth, then closed it. And that was when I knew. Even now, after everything, she was still trying to manipulate the situation. Still trying to twist the narrative into something that made her look less guilty. But the truth was standing between us, thick and undeniable. "You can tell yourself whatever you need to," I said finally, stepping back. "But it doesn't change anything." Her breath hitched. "So that's it." I nodded. "Yeah, Megan, that's it." She didn't say another word. She just looked at me, really looked at me, like she was seeing me for the first time. And maybe, in some way, she was, because for the first time in years, I wasn't the man waiting for her to choose me. I was the man who had finally chosen himself. She exhaled shakily and turned toward the door, gripping the suitcase tighter, and then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her. Final. That I stood there for a long time, unmoving, staring at the wood grain like it might give me some kind of answer that it didn't. The only thing I felt was the quiet, settling around me, pressing in heavier than before. For the first time in years, I was alone in this house, and the strangest part, it did not feel as bad as I thought it would. I had always associated alone with loneliness, with emptiness. But now, standing in the wreckage of a love I had once believed in, I realized something. Being alone was not the same as being lonely. Megan had been gone for a while. Long before she ever walked out that door, I exhaled, dragging a hand over my face, willing myself to feel something. Anger, sadness, relief, anything other than this eerie calm. But the truth was, I had already mourned this marriage long before tonight. This was just the official ending. Still, habits were hard to break. I caught myself glancing at my phone, half expecting a message, maybe a desperate plea, an apology, a last-minute attempt to manipulate me into letting her back in. But there was nothing, just an empty notification bar and a silent room. I wasn't sure what I had expected. Megan had made her choice, and I had made mine. I turned away from the door, scanning the living room. That it was ours, had been ours, but suddenly it looked foreign. The framed pictures on the shelves, the throw blankets draped over the couch, the coffee mugs we had collected over the years. They all felt like relics of a life that no longer belonged to me. Maybe it was time to let them go too. That I walked toward the bookshelf, reaching for the first framed photo my fingers touched. It was from our 3rd anniversary, a trip to the mountains. Back when we still laughed without effort. When she still looked at me like I was enough. I stared at it for a moment, tracing the edges. Then, I turned it face down. One by one, I went through the room, removing the reminders of her. Not out of spite, not in anger, just out of necessity. Because this was not our home anymore. It was mine. And it was time I started treating it that way. By the time I was done, the room felt lighter. Not completely, but enough. Enough for me to take my first real breath in what felt like years. I sank onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, letting the exhaustion finally catch up to me. And I knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be moments of doubt, of loneliness, of second-guessing. But for the first time in a long time, I also felt something else. Hope. Megan had spent the night chasing her past. Me? I was finally ready to start my future. The morning light filtered through the blinds, streaks of gold stretching across the floor. For the first time in years, I woke up without that familiar, crushing weight on my chest. The house was quiet, not the heavy, suffocating silence from the night before, but a peaceful one, a silence that belonged to me. Megan was gone. That was a fact. And instead of feeling like it was the end of something, I realized it was the beginning. I stood up and stretched, rolling the stiffness from my shoulders. The couch had not been the most comfortable place to sleep, but I had barely noticed. I had been too drained to care. I walked into the kitchen, grabbing my favorite mug, the plain one Megan always made fun of. I smirked to myself as I poured the coffee, taking the first sip slowly. It was funny how something so simple could feel like taking back a part of myself. I leaned against the counter, glancing at my phone. Still no messages, no calls, not from Megan, not from anyone. Good. I was not sure if I was ready to hear from her yet, if I ever would be. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts, stopping on a name I had not reached out to in a while. Charlie. My oldest friend. He had always been wary of Megan, though he never said it outright. But I could see it in the way he looked at me whenever I talked about our problems, the way he held back his opinions. He knew what I did not, or maybe what I refused to admit. I tapped out a quick message. Me. Hey man, I could use a drink tonight. The reply came faster than I expected. Charlie. Finally. I was starting to think you were lost for good. See you at 7. My treat. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. I needed this. Not just the drink. The reminder that life existed outside of Megan, outside of this house, outside of the version of myself that had spent the last year clinging to something that had been falling apart. The hours passed slowly. I spent most of the morning clearing out the last remnants of Megan's presence. The pictures, the small things she had left behind that I had not noticed the night before. A bottle of perfume in the bathroom, a sweater draped over the back of a chair, a hairbrush on the dresser. Each item felt like another layer peeling away, another reminder of a life that no longer belonged to me. By the time the house was finally free of her, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Lighter. Freer. It was not until I was in the shower that the realization truly hit me. For the first time in 9 years, I did not have to check in with anyone. I did not have to worry about what time I would be home, or if Megan would be waiting for me, arms crossed, demanding to know where I had been. I did not have to brace myself for the exhaustion of trying to fix something that was never going to be fixed. I could just be. That thought stayed with me as I stepped out, dried off, and got dressed. I had always been the kind of guy who played it safe, who avoided change, who stuck things out longer than he should have, even when they were already broken beyond repair. But last night had changed something in me. And tonight I was going to start figuring out who I was without her. At exactly 7 p.m., I walked into the bar. Charlie was already there, sitting in a booth near the back, a beer in front of him. The moment he saw me, he grinned and raised his glass. Look who finally decided to rejoin the living. I smirked, sliding into the seat across from him. Yeah, let's just get the first round before you start gloating. He laughed, waving over the waitress. A few minutes later, a cold drink was in my hand. Charlie studied me for a moment, his expression turning more serious. So, you really did it? I nodded. Yeah, she came home. I told her it was over. She left. He let out a low whistle. Damn, I didn't think you had it in you. Neither did I admitted, taking a sip. A beat of silence passed between us before he leaned forward. How do you feel? I thought about that for a second. And then, I answered honestly. Free. Charlie chuckled. Well, that's a good sign. I nodded, swirling my drink in my hand. Yeah, I think it is. The conversation shifted after that. For the first time in a long time, I was not talking about Megan. I was not analyzing, overthinking, making excuses for her behavior. I was just here, with my friend. Living. Halfway through my second drink, Charlie smirked. So, what's next for you? Gonna go full bachelor mode? Start hitting the dating apps? Buy a motorcycle? I laughed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think I just need to figure out what life looks like without her first. He nodded in understanding. Fair enough. But when you're ready, I know a few people who would love to meet a guy like you. I rolled my eyes. Let me survive a week of single life first, all right? Charlie grinned, raising his glass. To new beginnings, then. I hesitated for half a second. And then, I clinked my glass against his. To new beginnings. As I took another sip, I felt something settle inside me. Something steady. Something sure. Megan had spent the night chasing her past me. I was finally ready to move toward my future. The bar was livelier than I had expected for a weeknight, but I did not mind. The noise, the laughter, the hum of conversation. It all felt like a welcome distraction. For the first time in a long time, I was not sitting across from Megan at some overpriced restaurant, pretending we were still happy. I was not analyzing her every glance at her phone, not wondering why she suddenly seemed so disconnected. That I was just here. In the moment, Charlie leaned back in the booth, smirking as he finished off his drink.
All recht, Mann.
Be honest. Any part of you regret it? I thought about that for a second, letting the question settle. Did I regret it? Regret the years I wasted? Maybe. Regret the nights I stayed up worrying, the times I made excuses for her, the way I let her slowly make me feel like I was not enough? Yeah, a little. But regret letting her go? No, I said firmly, meeting his gaze. Not even a little. Charlie grinned. Good, because she never deserved you, and you sure as hell deserve better. I exhaled, shaking my head. It's crazy, you know? I spent so much time trying to hold on to something that was already gone. And now that it's over, I don't feel broken. I feel lighter. Because you're not carrying her anymore, Charlie said simply. That kind of weight drags you down, man. Now, you're finally standing on your own again. I let those words sink in. For the past year, I had been drowning without even realizing it. And now, without Megan weighing me down, I could breathe again. For the rest of the night, we talked about everything except her. Old stories, stupid jokes, plans for the future. By the time we walked out of the bar, the air was cool and crisp, the kind of night that felt fresh, like a reset. Charlie clapped me on the shoulder.
All recht, Mann.
You good to drive? I nodded. Yeah, I only had two. I'm fine. Good, he said, pointing at me. Because we're doing this again soon. No more disappearing for months at a time. I chuckled. Yeah, no more disappearing. I got in my car, rolling down the windows as I drove home. For the first time in forever, I was not dreading walking through that front door. The house was dark when I stepped inside, but it no longer felt empty. That it felt like mine. I locked the door behind me and headed to the kitchen, setting my keys down on the counter. That was when I saw it, my phone, face down next to the coffee maker. The screen was lit up at a missed call from Megan. I stared at it for a second, then swiped to see the message she had left. Megan, Jack, I don't know where to go. Can we just talk? Please? A deep sigh left my chest. That I had expected this. I had known this was coming. But seeing it there in black and white just confirmed what I had suspected all along. Megan had never thought I would actually follow through. She thought she could walk all over me, take me for granted, and that I would always be there, waiting. Not this time. Not anymore. I locked my phone and placed it back on the counter. I would not be responding. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. I walked to the living room and sank onto the couch, letting my head fall back against the cushions. The silence surrounded me, but it no longer felt like something to be feared. It felt like peace. Megan had spent the night chasing the past. Me. I was finally moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, I truly believed that the best was yet to come.